Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for having this very important hearing on housing affordability. As we know, it's been debated and talked about a lot today about inflation, 41-year high. It's been going up every month. When my friends across the aisle and the administration have said it's going to go down or flatten, and every month it's gone up. It will be higher next month as well. The average price of a home sold in the second quarter of 2020 for $374,500. This is the average. This wouldn't even buy you a garage here, I don't think. But in the first quarter of 22, the average sales price was $507,800, so a 35% increase in 2 short years. If those numbers don't scare you, this spike exceeds the steep climb in home prices that we saw in the 2008 market crash that so much has been talked about. The situation we're seeing today is the preamble of what some would argue is we see another bubble coming as well, a dark financial period of time for the American people coming up. We've talked a lot about today in the hearing and many hearings about Treasury's late move to raise interest rates. Mr. Pinto, you talked about why were rates that low to begin with. So we're having this, everybody is talking about us going into a recession except for the people that are actually in charge of putting us into a recession. The bad monetary policy and the reckless government spending have put us on this path. You saw my colleague from Pennsylvania's chart. Brookings isn't a bastion of conservatism, and it's just the numbers. I mean, they're easily to be fact checks. We're not going to easily reverse this trend. We could talk about, we've talked about why the supply chain is bottled up. We might argue why the demand is so high all of a sudden for housing. Too much money chasing too few things, which is the layman's definition of inflation. Again, we've had hearings in here, and we've shared with the witnesses about this being the greatest economy ever. And do you agree or disagree? And the witnesses for the Democrat Party have denied that, only to find out that President Biden is the one that said that about the economy. So it's nobody back home in our district believes this. They don't believe 9% because they're experiencing 20% increase. When you look at, or 20% inflation, when you look at the things that they spend their everyday monies on, energy for their home, fuel for their car, and food for themselves. Money is running out. And we have got to get this inflation under control, and the policies we're having right now and debating in Congress are not going to be what stops that. Prior to coming to Congress 3.5 years ago, I spent 9 years as a real estate developer and a home builder. And I can tell you I've had people call me from across my district and across the state concerned about what's happened. Building costs are up 19% year over year. Delivery costs are sharply increased due to rising fuel costs. Can't get people. It's devastating. Can't make their profits, well, they quit building homes, so they cut inventory, which drove up pricing. Right now, we're seeing the interest rate go. We saw 60,000 home purchase agreements were canceled in just last month, equal to almost 15% of the homes that went under contract. That's the highest cancellation rate since the start of the pandemic. Mr. Pinto, thank you for joining us today. I have a few questions. Is a recession coming? We'll try to keep these very short if we can.
I think there'll be a recession in the technical definition, which is 2 consecutive quarters with declining GDP. It could happen the last quarter and this quarter we're in. It more likely will happen next year. I don't think there's going to be a house price deflation, as I mentioned earlier, this year or next.
So do you, how do you see that impacting the housing market? It's going to help it, hurt it?
I think if it's a relatively minor recession, and any recession has impact, I think it will not have a large impact on the housing market in terms of creating foreclosures and things like happened last time. On the other hand, if that recession gets more severe due to making additional bad policy mistakes, then it could impact the housing market much more severely.
Does the government regulation of the housing market distort the market and make it harder to create affordable housing?
Absolutely.
How so?
The government, you can see it from all of the acts. I put a list of 40 acts that this Congress has passed over the last 70 or 80 years. There are many more that could be added to that list. The financing, 80% of the financing in the United States is provided by the federal government, guaranteed by the federal government for single family. The federal government basically is involved completely and totally in the housing market from one end to the other. And so whatever problems we're having is due to 2 things. One, the intervention of the federal government, and two, the legacy of that zoning that I talked about from 1921, where the federal government said, exclude everything but single-family detached, and for the purpose of keeping blacks and ethnic minorities out of those neighborhoods. That's where both of the problems we have today come back to the federal government.